Well, I think if you talk to business people, they say that the reason they're investing quite a lot at the moment is not necessarily because they think Brexit's going to be a triumph, nor because, despite Brexit, but because they see technology moving very fast, artificial intelligence coming along. There's a lot of opportunities in the UK for that, both in fintech and biotech and AI and so on. So we're actually in a very good position to do all that, as long as the bump in the road that is Brexit is not too bad, or not too good, if you like. Then that is what will determine whether or not we're a successful nation. So what really counts is what we do after Brexit. Do we make the British economy really fit for purpose in the 21st century?
Now, it's also important to include everybody, if you like. So if you look at the technological challenges ahead of us, what do you think we should be doing to make sure that everybody has the right engagement, the right sort of education to deal with it?
Well, I think one of the problems Britain has got is that although we've got very good employment numbers at the moment, 4.3% unemployment, extremely good, our skills base isn't as good as it should be. And if you talk to the tech companies, they're really worried about where they find skilled people. So we've really got to ramp up our engagement with data science, with artificial intelligence, with these kind of things. One of the problems, actually, is that as soon as you hire a good artificial intelligence professor in a university, he gets hired away by Google or something. So there's a bit of a race going on in technology. But I do think that education and skills are crucial there. Also, though, post-Brexit, being able to be much more nimble in our regulatory decisions around technology. The European Union has been tremendously anti-innovation in some ways, particularly in the biotech sector, but also to some extent in the digital sector. And there is an opportunity for us to take decisions quicker, which is really all that matters.
Although in medical science, things like genetically engineered organisms or stem cells or, even abortion, we're a long way ahead of America.
Well, to some extent, the medical aspects of biotech haven't been something that the EU has got its claws into, unlike the agricultural aspects of biotech, where the European Union has made a big difference and slowed everything down. There is, as you say, stem cells, Britain is, and that kind of biotech, Britain is a leader in and should continue to be. Now,
in spite of your interest in science, you have been pretty sceptical about climate change and global warming. Why is that?
Well, I think it's real. I'm not a denier. I think it's happening. I just don't see the evidence that it is an immediate and urgent crisis. And meanwhile, the measures we are taking against it are doing real harm, particularly to poor people in poor parts of the world. And I think that's a mistake. I think there are greater environmental problems, such as invasive species, what we're doing to the oceans, things like that. And the evidence actually is supporting me more and more.
But if you talk about the oceans, isn't it related? I mean, we had statistics this week saying that CO2 levels in the atmosphere are the highest ever. That contributes both to acidification and indeed the warming of the temperature of the oceans.
The real threats to the oceans are overfishing, the destruction of coral reefs by other means, plastics. These are much more immediate and much bigger threats
not
to the ocean.
Acidification or warming.
Acidification is a very, very slow effect. And the latest evidence, the latest scientific evidence suggests that most corals actually create their own pH level and don't actually, the pH goes up and down. This is the acidity.
What about rising temperatures?
Rising temperatures is, we are seeing warming of the oceans, as we saw before. The oceans warmed in the 1930s, they then cooled again, they're now warming again. Species shift their range. We're seeing all sorts of changes, we always do. But I'm not convinced that they are the most pressing problems facing this generation. Any real danger comes 100 years away or so, and we have time to adapt and get ready for that.
Now, you did feature in Brexit, the movie. Let's have a look at that star appearance there.
For many in Britain, the EU sticks in the craw. EU regulation seems absurd and intrusive. We don't like being bossed around by a bunch of bureaucrats. For the British, it seems to go against the grain.
There's a huge cultural difference. I've seen it for myself. When I was in government, when I went to meetings of the Council of Ministers, they thought I came from another planet.
There is still in many parts of the continent a notion that the way that society should be organised is to have a class of wise, experienced, public-spirited experts who will run things in the best interests of all. The British historically have been deeply sceptical of this kind of approach.
Britain, I think, does stand out within Europe, and one of the odd things is why they want to keep us in the club, given that they're always complaining about us.
But they did want to keep us in the club. I mean, they felt we had something to contribute.
Well, their behaviour since has rather implied that I mean, you know, if they'd really wanted us to change our minds, they wouldn't have been quite so rude, or Mr. Selmayr wouldn't have been quite so rude over the last few months, surely. The evidence suggests that there's not much change in the
so
British people's view.
What do you think we're going to gain by leaving the European Union?
I think we're going to gain the chance to regulate our own economy in a more nimble and efficient way. I think we're going to gain the possibility of free trade around the world instead of just within one continent. I think we're going to gain the chance to make our own laws.
And more exploitation of workers?
Certainly not. No, quite the reverse. The best thing we can possibly do, as we discovered in the Corn Laws 150 years ago, is free trade, because that raises the standard of living of the poorest people much quicker than it raises the standard of living of the richest people.